Hi, this is Sabdin Bhartiya, and we are here at KubeCon CloudNativeCon in Atlanta. And today we have with us Teo Gonzalez, Head of AI Business Development at Airbyte. Theo, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I've been covering Airbyte for a very long time, but these days, no matter which company you talk about, to which topic you talk about, AI always finds a way in there. So, first of all, talk about the context of AI for Airbyte.
Absolutely. I think for us, you can't have good AI without great data. And that's something a lot of people have talked about. I know you've talked about it often as well. So for us, given our focus on getting access to all the data silos a company has available to it and making that access to available to a human has always been something we've been doing from our beginning. And now we think of who is the consumer of data, not only as a human, but also an AI agent or other AI workload. And so for that reason, when we think of AI at Airbyte, it is still pursuing that mission of making data accessible and usable for whoever is the end consumer, human or AI, but it's now taking extensions to the platform and to our own methodologies to make sure that the data is exactly how it is needed for the AI to be successful with whatever workload it's running.
Now, how would you define what is right data? Because it may also depend on the context, it may depend on the industry, it may depend on the company that operated. So it's not like one size fits for everybody. Some industries can be heavily regulated industry and you cannot get the data you want because of whatever regulation. So how would you define this right data?
Yeah. I think understanding the definition of right data comes down to having a platform that is very configurable. And so what is right for someone will look different based off of where they are, exactly to your point. And so when we think of enterprises, for example, who have stricter regulatory requirements, and maybe they have concerns regarding data sovereignty, they think about needing a platform that can be maybe using their own cloud. And so the Airbyte as a platform is meant to be either hosted by Airbyte, fully hosted if you're using open source, or maybe even using some kind of hybrid approach if you are using our Flex product. And so configurability is really at the heart of being able to meet someone with whatever their requirements are. And having the data resonate with that includes not only a platform that brings it, but it also means having data in the right format, having it include the right metadata, giving you the data in a way that aligns with your architecture. Maybe it's bulk, maybe you need something a little bit more lightweight. Recognizing what you're trying to accomplish with your AI agent is paramount. And then we look to deliver a configurable platform that executes according to those plans.
Almost every organization is rushing to adopt AI now, which also means that they cannot even evaluate, what is the right data, how to safely, securely, in compliant manner handle, the data pipeline, governance. Also, the challenge is once you put your AI access to your data, the cat is out of the bag. You cannot put it back in the bag. What are some of the common mistakes you have seen organizations often make, and they're like, "Oh, please don't do that." And that's where Airbyte helps them in also ensuring that it's not just the right data, but also what data should go in there.
The first thing that comes to my mind is thinking about metadata as much as you think about the data and the contents itself. So a great example is when you think of file systems. You're thinking about not only giving your agent access to maybe some kind of folders. Let's assume you have a whole bunch of HR playbooks. You also need to be cognizant of who has access to a specific file. So if you're giving access to the agent to the HR folder that has all those playbooks, the AI agent also might have access to payroll data because that might be under the HR bucket. And so when people are designing systems, one of the most important things I always point out is it's not only about just giving the data all of the content, but it's the context about that data that's super important. If you're not doing that, you're not going to bulletproof your systems for potentially detrimental outcomes downstream.
You hit another keyword, that context matter. In the AI, just data itself doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
The whole prompt engineering, the context. What you mentioned Flux earlier, we talked about that. What technology, what tools Airbyte offers these organizations so they can also prioritize what kind of data, when, how, with the context is given.
Context management and the tools that are provided for it is a really interesting thing that we're continuing to build on at Airbyte. Right now, what we can do incredibly well is thinking about understanding what does the source data look like, what is the schema, what are things that you might want to modify in said schema to better align with your internal data practice once you have that in your data platform, warehouse, lakehouse of your so choosing. And in there's a variety of configurations that you can go ahead and modify so that the data is arriving exactly as you would expect. That said, I think it's really important that the world of AI is changing every single week. It's important to talk about where Airbyte is today and where it is going. And so in addition to the fact that we're a really strong platform for doing that bulk data movement, a lot of the conversations we're having with our customers is, where else can we meet you where you are, where your agents are, so that they are getting the right context the way you need it. And what that might mean is not everything is going to be bulk data movement for Airbyte in the future. There might be a world in which we can say, guess what? You've trusted us to be able to manage all of your Salesforce pipelines. Now we can help you go ahead and selectively pull specific data sets, so you don't need to do all of the ingestion into your data warehouse and do all the processing there. We have enough information on the schema, the data itself, the query that you're working to service with your AI agent to be able to selectively get what is required and make that available to you without a bunch of additional overhead.
And let's just for a second forget about data itself.
Yep.
As organizations, I mean, it's not somebody's going to embrace, everybody's embracing it, but as they are moving towards AI, what are the key things they should prioritize to make their AI initiatives more efficient in both terms of developer time, developer source, and also cost, and at the same time responsible?
The thing that we think a lot about there on how you can optimize is understanding where do you want to be investing your time. And so a lot of why when people engage with us, they're thinking about things. I know we said we would separate data, but it's always important to think about, where is your developer time going? We speak about building connectors, but our platform is especially important so you don't need to maintain connectors, which we think is actually one of the biggest time sinks for a developer's time when it comes to managing a system that's interconnected to other sources or targets. And so for us, a candid conversation we have is, what are your priorities? Is your business going to be at the frontier in designing an amazing experience and application to fulfill a support use case? And if so, you're going to need to invest that time in understanding, what are people asking? How do you deliver a response? You do not have the time to be focusing on every way that Zendesk might change their API at any given moment and hijacking your roadmap. And so prioritization is really what brings someone to Airbyte, and to figure out how we can get that context to the agent to execute on what is actually the prime goal of that customer.
From the early on, I think Airbyte's role is also in connecting data across platforms,
Yep.
right? How are you helping teams in this era, in this age of AI, to simplify that process for AI workloads?
I think a lot of that is understanding how this data will intersect. It's not just a matter of dumping everything anymore into a single location. Yes, that might be at the surface level what it looks like, but if you're building your sophisticated platform that's going to deliver good outcomes, you're doing a numerous, very thoughtful workloads, to your point, on how that data will overlap. So HubSpot, Salesforce, sure, that's your standard CRM object, but there are slight differences and you need to understand that. Now, as more people get involved in data-related activities where they're bringing all that data together, it's not enough to bring it into a certain location. You need to know about what is happening and have the context about the context to be able to execute on all those workloads. So that's something that's really important to point out.
How do you see the relationship between data infrastructure and AI evolving over time? And what role do you see Airbyte playing in this space?
We've started noticing something really interesting, which is a lot of the leading AI startups that are starting to come up with AI architecture are thinking more and more like data engineers themselves. They're needing to adopt those best practices because they recognize data is important for their LLM, but they might not have that data background before they even got into this space. And so they know how to build an application, but they are now realizing, oh, how do I think about the way schemas are going to be coming together? How do I think about masking data? How do I think about the way I want to adjust based off of new fields that have become available? And so for that reason, I think the role of Airbyte data to AI infrastructure is really just that you need data at the core of both. Data infrastructure was always done from a perspective of self-service analytics, you might say, whereas AI architecture is much more designed to take action. So I could see a world in which data infrastructure will make that leap as well, where it's much more action-oriented. But at the heart of the two, it comes with understanding your data as strongly as possible.
I've been covering Airbyte from early days, and open source, you folks have very strong focus on open source. What role do you see of open source in this AI landscape and from Airbyte's perspective?
Yeah, open source will always be immensely important. And the reason for that is because of two things. First, the power of a community is unparalleled. Like the idea that you can engage with others, share feedback and support one another in using a tool is hugely important, not just from a business model perspective, but in terms of a relationship with your customers, which leads to why the second part of it, it's really important to go open source because it decreases the latency in getting feedback tremendously. We can release new features and get immediately feedback from the community on what is working and what is not, and that gives immense distribution. And so if you always want to be cutting edge in the world of AI, you need to find out what is the way to get that feedback as soon as possible. And from our point of view, there's very few things that can compete with open source.
Now, when it comes to AI, and the foundation is data. We are hearing a lot about data sovereignty. At the same time, the biggest problem with AI is bias, which is built into that. Different countries, they have different cultural nuances. Some things are totally not acceptable. Like in Thailand, you cannot say anything against the king. You will be so ChatGPT cannot give any answer that can defy that. I was talking to someone from UAI. They built their own Falcon AI because they said the Western models are very much biased. So since you are working between data pipelines, how are you enabling countries, nations, organizations to have that data sovereignty without compromising on being able to use AI?
Yeah, and this is a great question in terms of where Airbyte falls in the stack. And so when we think of data sovereignty, it is largely in recognizing that each country, each enterprise has their own requirements and parameters that they need to be accounting for. And so our optimism and our assumptions when we're working with our customers is that they've designed that internal infrastructure accordingly in mind. And so when they work with us using maybe our Flex product, where they use open source, they're bringing that product into an infrastructure that they've already managed exclusively to be the connectivity layer and bring that data into the infrastructure. They are not managing the data right now with us, where it's saying manipulate it to remove bias or to ensure data is cleaned using Airbyte. It is much more, let me get access to it on my infrastructure and then fully evaluate it as it looks at the source so that I can properly manage it towards what I need to be modifying for. Maybe it is for bias, maybe it is for something alternative. And by doing so within your environment, you can mitigate all your legal risk, and you can also ensure that this is in line with the way you want your system to be designed.
Theo, thank you so much for joining me today and not only talk about, of course, some of these projects, but also the larger landscape of data, AI, right data, right meta context, right context. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank
and
you.
I look forward to chat with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to it.
Yep.